What makes a moment unexpected? Is it the shock of a tragic loss like what happened in Genosha, a surprising and severe shift in creative leadership, or an unexpected romance? To me, it's really all of the above, especially when it comes to X-Men history. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history. Decimation is by far one of the worst things to have ever happened to mutant kind, with even recent mass extinction comic book events which led up to this ultimately being overshadowed by the devastation of M-Day. M-Day happened as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy, but after learning of its falseness, was once again rejected by all those she had tried to help through reshaping reality. Namely though, Wanda was striking out at her then to be believed father, Magneto, who she claimed loved mutant kind more than he did his own family. Ooh. Wanda said the words, "No more mutants," and with that small utterance, depowered or destroyed millions of mutants the world over. Not only was the creation of the House of M universe surprising, especially in regards to on how massive a scale it was in the comics, but the fallout after would change the X-Men for years to come. How do you feel about massive scale events? Personally for me, I love things that go big and which make significant changes to the universe afterward. I think when it comes to events, it's always best to go big or go home. Make it big and make it mean something for both the world and the readers, you know what I'm saying? Jonathan Hickman announced in 2021 that he would be leaving his creative position as head of X come 2022. Many of us at the time reacted with some shock and worry over the uncertain future of the X books we had come to fall in love with over the past few years, since Hickman helped to revitalize the X-Men and mutant kind. And I think now that we're in 2024, some of that feels valid and some of it is surprisingly still doing alright. It's been a weird time. One of the most unexpected relationships to have ever existed in the X books, or at the very least one of the most controversial, was the one between Archangel and Husk. Now, why was this considered so weird and so unexpected? Well, Angel was one of the first ever X-Men on the original team of X-Men, by the way, back in the 1960s. Now, time works in some weird ways, I'll grant you, when it comes to comics, but Husk on the other hand was known to be the younger sister of Cannonball, who himself was a much later addition to the X-Men comics, first appearing almost 20 years after Angel on the New Mutants team in 1982. And Husk, Paige Guthrie, his younger sister, appeared 2 years later than that, in 1984. She was believed to be in her late teens or her early 20s, while Angel, although somewhat ageless and more ambiguous, would likely be in his 30s, I would say late 30s at least, if not older than that. And it was implied that he was quite a bit older throughout their relationship, to be honest. Add in the fact that these two got busy in the sky above the Guthrie family home, and yeah, you can see why so many fans were left bewildered and perhaps surprised by this relationship, myself included. If you've been keeping up with the modern era of X-Men comics, then you know in Inferno issue number 2 of the special event series, the most recent Inferno, we saw Colossus join the Quiet Council. Now, his addition to the Quiet Council left X-Force readers startled, as they knew Colossus was no longer seemingly in control of his body after having become a sleeper agent for Russia against his will. Russia's mutants for a long while were working to take over Colossus and turn him into their own agent, and it seems in issue number 24 of X-Force that they ultimately were successful, even getting him to kill his own new romantic partner, Kayla, who he actually seemed to care pretty deeply for. Pretty sad, and honestly that whole thing was very surprising when I read it. I was like, wait, what? Sometimes referred to as the Morlock Massacre, back in the day it was simply known as the Mutant Massacre. This was before massive mutant attacks like Genosha ever happened in the comics, which is also what made this even so shocking and horrible. We hadn't really had anything quite like this before. Although it happened on a smaller scale, the Mutant Massacre happened when Mr. Sinister, in essence, ordered the Morlocks be eradicated. He was like, get him out of here. He was like a gangster. He was like, make them swim with the fishes, you know? He sent his team of marauders to handle them and attack, killing many who lived down in the sewers. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, the Morlocks are basically less pretty mutants, let's say, ones who have dramatic physical mutations which often make it impossible for them to walk among humans on the surface world. Like, oh, poor Leech. Guys, I'm not over X-Men 97 the other day. It's breaking my heart. During the more recent Inferno event, a lot of truths were unearthed about the true allegiances of those who came together to create Krakoa, and just exactly who was behind the whole Mutant Island paradise. As readers, we already knew the story, but not all mutants did. In fact, not many mutants did, to be real with you. The truth was that Krakoa was founded by Magneto and Professor X, yes, but in addition to their ally and friend Moira McTaggart, who we recently found out during the House of X series was actually a mutant. Surprise, surprise. Moira claimed she wanted to help her fellow mutants, but in reality, she actually planned to end mutant kind. But instead of destroying them, she wanted to disguise her destruction in the guise of a mutant paradise, giving them kinda like one last hurrah, as they would then of course die out shortly after Krakoa rose to power. During Inferno, Moira's betrayal was brought to light and she was exiled from Krakoa. Though that most certainly would not be the last we'd see of her. Her evolution overall in comics, I would say, in recent years has been very unexpected. For better and for worse at times. What has surprised me about the Hellfire Gala, you ask? Well, while all of them were surprising kind of in their own way, some were more surprising than others. Namely the last Hellfire Gala we got, which also probably was the last one we'll ever see. Possibly ever. Probably ever. I mean, this is comics, so I don't like to say never again because you just don't know what'll come back around. It's all very cyclical. Still, what was startling about it was that it indeed felt just so final. Much more final than I was expecting, and it was honestly less of a gala and more of just a straight up massacre. I had learned that Dazzler was going to make the cut for the new X-Men team that year, and then just like that, pretty much all the X-Men were destroyed when Nimrod crashed the party. I wasn't expecting it to go so bad so fast, so I was one of the people that was reading it that was like, what's happening? The history of Genosha has pretty much been tumultuous and widely awful since the beginning of the comics. The island nation prospered for most of its history thanks to mutants who were born there and once identified had their free will stripped of them. At one point, Magneto got ownership of the island nation and attempted to turn it into a nation for mutant kind, trying to take it back, a place where mutants could call their own, reclaiming it and turning it into, in essence, a slice of paradise. This ended in disaster when millions of mutants were murdered on the island after it was attacked by Cassandra Nova's wild sentinels. It was a brutal and dark moment in mutant history, with the island being put on quarantine so that even those who did survive this attack, should they try to escape, were basically ordered to be shot on sight. So somehow even more surprising was the integration of the Genoshan Mutant Massacre storyline known as E for Extinction into the new X-Men animated series, X-Men 97, which is a continuation of the 90s classic. I had been pondering the whole time what was going to be happening with Genosha ever since I heard in that second episode that they're like, that's gonna be part of the United Nations. Which I also correctly theorized would incorporate some ideas from the modern Krakoa era into its animated version. I figured we were gonna get a melding, and we did. Yay. Finally though, when we did get the story of what was going on with Genosha, with the United Nations, yes, acknowledging it as its own mutant island nation, things took a dark turn and ended in complete and utter destruction. Similar to how things went down in E for Extinction, with a wild three-headed sentinel, the same one actually from the comics, being unleashed on the island, although just who sent it remains a mystery at the time of this recording. Because I'm not so sure it's Cassandra Nova. But also, could it be Cassandra Nova? I don't know. I think one of the most surprising moments we have had recently in X-Men history has actually been the announcement 1 week prior to the release of the X-Men 97 series that creator and showrunner Beau DeMayo was either fired or had parted ways with Marvel and Disney. This was right before the show was slated to premiere, and both the side of Disney and Marvel as well as the side of DeMayo have refused to comment on specifically what happened there, leaving us all to just speculate in the wings. Many have had their theories as to what went on. I've done multiple videos on it myself, but the fact remains that this becomes more and more bizarre and unexpected as the show continues to grow and expand in popularity and acclaim, seemingly with each episode's subsequent release. It's getting better and better, and we are not getting any answers on this. That's about it. I'm your host Amanda McKnight, and until next time, you stay nerdy.